At the NATO summit this week, President Trump didn't hold back. Standing in front of reporters, he called Jerome Powell, the current Fed chair, an average mind, even a very stupid person. And then he dropped the bomb. He's on his way out, thank God. I've got 3 or 4 people in mind who can actually do the job. It wasn't just a personal insult, it was a warning shot in a larger war, not against one man, but against the entire mindset that's kept interest rates sky high while millions of Americans struggle to buy groceries, pay rent, or own a home. What we're witnessing now is more than a political feud. It's a clash between 2 economic worldviews, and the outcome could reshape the financial future of every American household. For nearly 2 years, the Federal Reserve has held interest rates high to rein in inflation. But as 2025 unfolds, 2 sharply contrasting visions are colliding. Fed Chair Jerome Powell remains cautious. While inflation has cooled, Powell warns that new tariffs could spark a fresh wave of price hikes, especially if companies pass on those costs to consumers. He cites surveys showing many firms are doing exactly that. If it weren't for the risk of inflation reigniting due to trade barriers, we might already have cut rates, Powell told Congress this June. His message is clear: hold rates steady at 4.25% to 4.5% and wait. Cutting too soon could undo years of painful progress. What that meant for regular people? Let's talk about real-life consequences. Credit card interest now averages over 20%. Mortgage rates jumped from 3% to over 7%, pricing out millions from buying homes. Rent soared in most cities as landlords passed higher borrowing costs onto tenants. American households now hold over $1.1 trillion in credit card debt, a record. Grocery prices are up 21% since 2021, even higher for essentials like eggs, dairy, and meat. While the Fed's inflation fight made numbers look good in D.C., it made life unaffordable for working families. On the other side is President Trump, who is openly furious with Powell. Trump blames the Fed for choking the economy. He argues that inflation has dropped close enough to target and that it's time to ease up. Americans are suffering because Powell refuses to cut rates, Trump declared on the campaign trail. Trump also dismisses Powell's tariff concerns, insisting that trade barriers are necessary to protect U.S. jobs and shouldn't be used as a reason to keep borrowing costs high. Some insiders speculate that Trump's vocal attacks are paving a way to replace Powell before his term ends. After nearly 2 years of holding interest rates high to fight inflation, the Fed is now splitting into 2 camps. On one side, Chair Jerome Powell, New York Fed President John Williams, and most of the central leadership. They argue the current rate should stay put to prevent inflation from roaring back. On the other side, 2 Trump-appointed Fed governors, Michelle Bowman, Vice Chair for Supervision, and Christopher Waller, are openly calling for rate cuts. Bowman, once one of the most hawkish voices at the Fed in 2023. She even opposed a half-point rate cut last year, has now flipped. She says the Fed should begin easing, possibly as early as July 2025. Her reversal caught markets by surprise. As a result, the implied probability of a July rate cut jumped from 14% to nearly 25%. Waller has also voiced full support for cutting rates soon, a stance many see as a subtle signal to President Trump that he's ready to take over Powell's seat if given the chance. Meanwhile, Trump is preparing to replace Jerome Powell as Fed chair, and may do so as soon as this summer. Powell, ironically, was Trump's own pick in 2018, but their relationship soured fast. Let's rewind the tape. In 2020, when COVID hit, the Fed slashed interest rates to 0. Then it printed over $4 trillion in new money, flooding Wall Street and real estate with easy cash. At first, it felt great. Stock market soared, home prices jumped, and unemployment dropped. Everyone cheered. But behind the scenes, the seeds of inflation were already sprouting. The Fed kept rates at zero until 2022, even as gas, groceries, and rent began to spike because they insisted inflation was transitory. By mid-2022, inflation hit 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. And then Powell and Co. slammed on the brakes. They hiked interest rates from 0% to 5% to over 5% in just over a year,